reigns from heaven and earth. Some power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above the earth. Some power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. Amen. Song of Invitation number 193. 193.
Be opening your Bibles this morning, 1 Samuel chapter 13 is where we're going to begin in just a few minutes together. I know this looks different, doesn't it? I don't know. I think I know that we wanted to put the Lord's Supper in the most prominent place where it should be. That's where it needs to be. I've also been wondering, though, if at the same time they're moving me closer and closer to the back hall. So if next Sunday morning you just hear my voice but you don't see me, then that's where they've got me back there. And they also, the deacons are really thinking through these things. Whenever the projection is up here on the screen, those that are seated closer to the front sometimes miss some of it because of where the communion table used to sit. And they scooted me way over here so I wouldn't be in the way of some of it. But that's not going to limit me walking around. I'll still walk around. In time, I guarantee you, in time, I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but I promise in time I'm going to trip and fall on this step. So I'm just letting you know ahead of time, and whenever that does happen, it's okay to laugh. Then call the paramedics. But it is okay to go ahead and laugh. This morning we're going to be talking about King Saul, the first king over Israel. And God chose him as king because he was the very best that there was. God never chose anyone because they were bad. Whenever God is involved in the choosing, he always chooses the best that's available. And King Saul was the very best that was available. He was an extremely humble man. He was from the smallest of the tribes of Israel, the tribe of Benjamin, and there's significance to that. And I'll just give you a little bit of that history as we try to move quickly this morning. Benjamin was one of the 12 sons of Israel, or of Jacob. And he inherited land just like everyone else did, or his descendants did. There was a city in the land that Benjamin would later inherit that was called Gibeah. And when the children of Israel went into the land to conquer the land, to fight against it under the leadership of Joshua, they get into the land, and all of the inhabitants of the land already know how things are going to go. I mean, they've heard all about them. You remember that story from the battle against Jericho. Whenever they sent the spies to Jericho, and Rahab hid them, and she tells them that the people of Canaan, especially the people of Jericho, that we have trembled. We have been in fear of you arriving here, thinking that this might be your destination. And whenever we saw that you were camped against us, all of the heart of our mightiest fighting men left them. And we're afraid because we know what your God has done. Boy, that's powerful, church. The world knows what God does. The world knows what God has done. Now, it doesn't mean all the world accepts it. Obviously, the people in Canaan didn't because they were idol-worshiping people. But they knew what God had done from the time that God brought his judgment against Egypt and led the children of Israel out, and all the mighty things that he did. But anyway, all of the inhabitants of Canaan are afraid because they know that they cannot stand against this army of God's people. And so the people of Gibeah, now Gibeah had a very interesting makeup. They were very much like the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. there was a lot of homosexuality in the city of Gibeah. But the people of Gibeah decided that the only way that we're going to survive this, if they laid siege to our city, there's not going to be anybody left. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take some of our men and we're going to disguise them, and we're going to make them look like they are pilgrims on a long trip. And so they put on their oldest and their dirtiest clothes, their worn out clothes, their worn out sandals, and they get old packs that have holes in them, and they get old stale bread, and they get old moldy cheese, and they pack all up. And then they circle way around the children of Israel, and they come in from behind, and they come up and they identify themselves. These weary travelers, and they say, we're just like y'all are. You're just now coming to the land of Canaan, and we're looking for a place to live, and so here we are, and we're a small group, and you're this mighty army, and so let's make a deal between ourselves. And so the men of Israel, they hear it and they bring it to Joshua, and they tell them they have been thoroughly deceived. They've been thoroughly deceived. And Joshua makes a vow to them. He doesn't ask the Lord. The title of our lesson this morning, you saw it just a minute ago, Inquiring of the Lord. Well, this is a problem. It's a problem with Saul, and it's a problem because of his roots, where he came from. These were deceptive people. And they don't ask God about things. But the men of Gibeah come to Joshua, and Joshua makes a vow to them in the name of the Lord that no harm will come to these people or their relatives. And that they will live together in the land of Canaan, they'll be at peace with each other. And so these men from this homosexual community, they leave and they circle back around and they get to their hometown again, and they're waiting there whenever the army of Israel finally gets to that place to fight against them and take this city. The men of Gibeah come out and they say, wait a minute. Now they're wearing all their nice clothes. The leaders of Gibeah, they come out and they say, wait a minute, we made a deal, don't you remember? You made an oath. You vowed to us that nothing would come to us. No harm would come to us. That we could live peacefully in your land. Made no difference that they lied and misrepresented themselves. Joshua had not asked God what God wanted him to do with those people. And Joshua is embarrassed and he's angry. And he's angry with himself. But he has to keep the promise that he made. He took an oath to God. That's a big thing. And so what he ends up doing is he ends up saying, okay, you can live peacefully among our people, but you will be our servants. You'll be our woodcutters for all of your life. And your children after you. You'll always be servants, and you'll always cut our firewood for us. And so that's what happened. So these people, through deception, had their own security blanket there. Well, things don't get better over time. They just get worse. You start out that way, and it just gets worse. And so what eventually happens is God says, I want you to destroy those people. I want you to destroy those people. And all the armies of the tribes of Israel send their armies together, except Benjamin. Benjamin will not send their army, because these people are living within the territory of Benjamin, and they won't send their army to fight. And when all the other armies of the different tribes come together, these 10 other tribes, one tribe didn't have a fighting army, the tribe of Levi. And so these 10 other tribes come against Benjamin, and they say, you don't realize what's about to happen. We're going to destroy those people. And Benjamin says, in essence, over our dead body. They live in our land. They are part of our people. They are part of our tribe. You have no authority here. We will fight against you and for them. And so Israel asked God, what shall we do? And God says, fight. And Benjamin did fight. Benjamin did fight against his own brothers. And they lost. And the army of Israel pursued the soldiers of Benjamin until they had taken refuge up on a hill, and there were only 600 men, fighting men, left in Benjamin. Only 600 fighting men left in Benjamin. And God said, that's enough. If you fight any longer, if you fight even in the morning, then there's not going to be anyone left of this tribe. And so this tribe that had been a big and flourishing tribe at one time now has only 600 men. And so whenever Saul tells Samuel, the prophet that comes to anoint him as king, whenever he says, I'm nobody. I'm part of an insignificant family, and I'm of the smallest tribes, the most insignificant tribe. I'm of the tribe of Benjamin. Why are you coming to me wanting me to be king? And the truth is because he was the best that there was available. But it changed him. It changed him. And some of these old connections, some of these old relationships, some of these old habits that had begun right there among his tribal people and then spread, he picks them up. And I want you to listen to what's happening here, because he dismisses what God has said. And we're going to begin in 1 Samuel chapter 13. And I want you to listen to 4 verses here. The Philistines have come against them. And King Saul has fought. He's gathered up some men and he's fought against the Philistines, and they won a battle. And everybody is just dancing. They're so excited because they won a battle against the Philistines. Well, the Philistines also hear about it. All of Israel hears about it, and they're excited, but also all the people of Philistine, wherever they live, they've heard about it too. And so now they're angry, and they bring their entire army back. And now Saul knows he's in trouble, and he's afraid. And he sends for Samuel to come, because Samuel can offer sacrifices. Samuel can lead in worship because he is of the tribe of Levi, of the priestly tribe. God had explained that in the law of Moses. If you remember when we were studying about that last year, it's important that we remember that. Only the priests were allowed to do those kind of things, to offer sacrifice to God for the people. And so Samuel tells Saul, he says, I'll be there in 3 days. So listen to what happens in verse 8. Now, he waited 7 days. He said, I said 3 days, 7 days. He said, I'll be there in 7 days. And so now Saul waited 7 days according to the appointed time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal. And the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, bring to me the burnt offering, the peace offering. And he offered the burnt offering, and it came about as soon as he finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him and to greet him. Has that ever happened in your life? When someone says, now, I'll be there at a certain time, I'm going to do something, and you have your schedule all set, and then they don't show up right then, and so you go ahead and you change your plans, and then as soon as you've changed your plans and got all them set, then they show up. And they're really not as late as maybe you think that they are, because Samuel had told Saul, he said, I'll be there in 7 days, and he showed up in 7 days. On the 7th day, he's there. But Saul jumps the gun. He disregards what God has said because he thinks it's okay. Now, the people are scattering, they're leaving, and I'm not going to have an army left. And after all, Samuel did say he'd be here in 7 days, but that still does not alter the word of God. Saul was from the tribe of what? Help me out. Of Benjamin. Can you spell Benjamin? It doesn't even sound like Levi, does it? He has no connection at all with the priestly family. But yet he assumes that it's going to be okay. And he disregards what God has said to him through the law, and he disregards what Samuel has said to him in person or through messengers. And then in verse 13, same chapter 13, now verse 13 and 14. And Samuel said to Saul, you have acted foolishly. He says, you have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. You have no authority to do this, Saul. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever, but now the kingdom shall not endure. Your kingdom shall not endure. The Lord has sought out for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has appointed him as ruler over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. And it doesn't get better. This is the beginning of his reign as king, and it doesn't get better. I mean, we follow chapter after chapter after chapter, and Saul continually disregards what God has said until finally the Philistines have come back. And now we're in chapter 28. We're toward the end of Saul's life. In chapter 28, the Philistines come back. And Saul's dead, or Samuel's dead. He can't even call Samuel anymore. And he has no good relationship with any of the other priests and any of the other prophets. And so he decides he's going to talk to a witch. He decides he's going to talk to a witch. He can't talk to God because God won't answer him. God's quit answering him. No one's going to help him talk to God because they don't have a relationship anymore. He's not changed his life. He's not changed his lifestyle. And so he decides, I'm going to go talk to a witch. Now, God had made that very clear back over in the book of Leviticus again. In Leviticus chapter 20 and verse 27, God said, you are not to allow a witch to live. You want to know where the basis of the Salem witch trials came from? It was from a literal interpretation of what God said in Levi chapter 20 and verse 27 to us today. God doesn't say that to us today. Now, He does warn us about those people who will seek to communicate with God or with spirits in any way other than through God. But God had made it very clear. He said, you are not to allow a witch to live, or anyone that practices sorcery or calls himself a medium and says that they can communicate with spirits. And there's a lot of that going on today. But God said under Moses' law, you're not to allow them to live. And Saul had even kept this part of God's law. He had even sent out decrees, and he had sent out people to rid all of Israel of these witches that were leading people away from God. But now he tells some of his most trusted advisors, he said, go find me a witch. Are there any witches left? Have we killed all of them? Are there any witches left? And his advisors say, yeah, there's one that lives down at Endor. And he said, good, I want to go talk to her. You set it up. And so he disguised himself. Now that in itself is interesting because the Bible tells us that Saul was a giant. He was head and shoulders taller than every other soldier in the army of Israel. I mean, it'd be like walking up and seeing Dale Reeves if you walked up and saw King Saul. He's tall and he's big, and King Saul tries to disguise himself. How do you disguise yourself? How could you look like a hobbit if you were as big as Dale? You just couldn't do it. But he tries. And so he disguises himself, and at night they go to see this witch. And his servants, his two men, have accompanied him, and he goes in to visit with this witch lady, and he says, I want you to talk to someone who has already died. I want you to conjure up a spirit for me because I need to ask some questions of this person who has already died. And she said, this is a trick, isn't it? She said, I know you're trying to set me up because King Saul said that there were not to be any witches allowed to live. And so all the witches have been killed, and so I'm kind of in hiding, and you're just trying to get me to do something so you can turn me into Saul and get me killed. Oh, listen to what Saul does. I tell you what, church, once you take a step away from God, it's so easy to take that other step away from God and that other step away from God, and it goes from bad to worse. Because now, while he's standing there talking to this witch, which God had said, you're not even to allow this woman to live, and she knows that, and he's even given those instructions to his men before. Don't let them live. He makes a vow to God, before God. He uses the name of God, and he swears to this woman that no harm will come to her. As surely as God lives, no harm will come to her. Oh man, Saul, what are you doing? Stop and think about where you are. Come on, come on, Saul. Think about this for a minute. But he doesn't. And the witch says, okay, all right, if you'll protect me, then you've just taken a vow, so everything's going to be all right. And so she starts going through all of her motions, whatever she does and however she's going to, and all of a sudden she screams. I mean, she screams out loud because she sees the Spirit. I don't know if this had ever happened to her before or not. It kind of sounds like it never had. But God brings the spirit of Samuel from the dead. And Saul is so excited. He says, what do you see? And she said, I see someone of a divine presence coming. And he says, well, what does he look like? And she describes Samuel. And he says, good, talk to him. I want to know. And Samuel begins to talk through her, and then begins to talk to Saul himself. And he says, why have you troubled my rest? Why have you brought me back from the presence of the Lord? Why have you done this? Let me tell you what you've been doing. You've been moving further and further away from God, and tomorrow at this time, you're going to be with me. Tomorrow you're going to be dead, Saul, and all of your sons are going to be dead. And it scared Saul. And he fell down on his face. And he worships. It's too late for that, Saul. You're worshiping the wrong one. You're bowing down before Samuel. And you know what? The Bible tells us what the end of this was. If we go to, this is going to be on the screen there for you to read. If we go to 1 Chronicles, it's telling us about and it shortens it down. It doesn't even take as long as what I've taken to tell that. And you know that already. Chapter 10 and verse 13. Listen to what God says here. And so Saul died for his trespass which he committed against the Lord, because of the word of the Lord which he did not keep, also because he asked counsel of a medium, making inquiry of it. And he did not inquire of the Lord, therefore he killed him. God killed him. And he turned the kingdom to David, the son of Jesse. He just kept piling it up. He just kept piling it up. Now you say, boy, that's a powerful story right there. Let me tell you what, church, it's happening right here in some of your lives. It's happening right here. And I don't preach a lesson to just point somebody out. Sandy, I don't ever do that. I would never preach a lesson and just say, all right, boy, I've got Sandy in the crosshairs this morning. I don't do that. I just teach what God has said. But I know because there's more than just a handful of people here. I know that some of you are living Saul's life right now. You have the appearance on the outside of everything being fine. And you do a lot of what God has said, but you're asking the wrong people for help when you need help. I tell you what, if I go and ask my friends in the world what I should do if my wife has not been nice to me, they're not going to tell me what God says. If you go out and ask anybody, if you go to work and you ask the people at work that you work around and you say, well, you won't believe, my wife's had me sleeping on the couch for a month. Your friends are going to say, leave her, find somebody else. I guarantee you they're going to tell you that. And you go and you ask your friends, well, what should I do? My husband, he spends all the money and there's nothing left and I can't pay the bills and I'm having trouble feeding the kids but there's money there, and anytime I ask him about needing a little bit more money, he gets so upset with me and he just won't leave things alone. And you talk to your friends, I guarantee you they're going to tell you to leave that loser. The world is at enmity with God. The world is God's enemy. Not by God's design, but by man's choice. And you start listening to the world. That's why God says, listen to what I'm saying. That's why God was able to say to Saul, what you've done, number one, is you asked the wrong people. There's two things wrong here. Look at what he's saying. There's two things wrong. You're asking the wrong source, number one. And it happens. And there's some of you doing it today. And it's not because I've read your mail, it's because I know. I know your life. And I know what happens because God tells me about all of us right here. He tells me about all of us right here. And He tells us that this story about Saul is important for us. He tells me that 2 times in the New Testament. In the book of Romans, in the book of 1 Corinthians, He tells me these things were written for my learning so that I will not make the same mistakes that those people made back then. God doesn't want you to make the mistake that Saul made. So number one, the problem that Saul had, and one that some of you are wrestling with today, is you're asking the wrong people. Well, you won't believe how my boss has treated me. Well, tell him off. Tell him off. Well, I didn't get a raise this year. Well, pad your expense account. It's okay. Everybody does it. You know, it shouldn't have been a shocking thing, but it was that I heard on the news the other day, and I just assume, maybe I shouldn't, but I just assumed that whenever they were reporting an actual story that they were telling what really happened. And they were saying that most of the traders in the stock exchange admit to lying and cheating. And they say, well, if we didn't lie and cheat, we wouldn't make as much money. So it's okay. And they admit it. They're just trying to be good enough they don't get caught. Number one, you ask the wrong people. Ask the wrong source. The source is God. You ask Him, and He'll answer every question you've got. I guarantee it. It's right here. Problem number 2, not asking the Lord. I mean, God couldn't have spelled it out any better for us this morning than what He did in the life of King Saul. He said, you've got 2 problems here. And number 1, you're asking the wrong source. And number 2, you're not asking the Lord. And because of those things, what did God do? The Bible says, therefore He killed him. Saul died. That's a pretty high price. And the pressure's on right now, isn't it? The pressure's on. We're talking about finances. We're talking about relationship. And we'll talk more about that if the Lord allows time to continue next week. We're going to be here some more. The time of the year, the finances, all the things that are going on. Be careful with this one, church. Be careful with this one. This will get you. He paid a big price. I remember when I was a little boy. Maybe it was because I was little, maybe because I just was no good at playing marbles. I think this is where the expression came from that if you lose all your marbles, the game's over. And somebody will look at you and they'll say, have you lost your marbles? And maybe it just showed. I saved all my money when I would do little odd jobs for people and for my mom and dad. And I saved my money and I bought 2 things. I bought BBs from a BB gun and I bought marbles. I don't know why I bought marbles. Because I lost every one of them. I don't have a single marble left. So you can say, our preacher admitted today that he's lost all of his marbles. Well, I did. I lost all my marbles. And because there was two ways you could play. And I wised up a little bit, but not enough. There's 2 ways you can play marbles. You can play for fun, or you can play for keeps. Now, all the good marble players wanted to play for keeps. If you played for fun, then you all gathered up your own marbles, put them back in your little marble sack. And my mother convinced me as a little boy that the best marble sack in the world was a sock, one of my dad's old socks. Some of the guys had really good marble bags made out of leather, and you know they had bought them or somebody made them for them. But I love playing for fun. But eventually, if you start off playing for fun, somebody's going to say, "Well, let's play for keeps." And when they played for keeps, they took every one of my marbles. And there was a fellow that was 3 years older than me that went to church with us. My dad had just started preaching back then, and this guy went to church with us, and his name was Mark Allen. And Mark Allen, if you're watching this today, I love you, man. In fact, I even took Judy by once when we were traveling through East Texas just so that she could see where my dad started preaching. And who was there at church leading singing that day but Mark Allen. And I walked in the back, and it had been like 30 years, and he looks at me, and he just stopped singing. He went, "Mike? Is that you?" And then the second thing he said, "You want to play marbles?" I'm serious, church. And so they invited us over after church, and it was really neat to meet his wife and to talk about our kids and all that kind of thing. And I said, really, you still don't have all of those, do you? You don't have all my marbles? He said, they're not your marbles anymore. I mean, we're grown people, not your marbles anymore. He said, they're my marbles. We were playing for keeps, and that's what it means. And he did. He still had them. He went and got this giant leather sack out of his closet and brought it out and said, you want to look at them? I said, you're killing me. Don't do that to me. You're killing me. Now, I can laugh about that. And you know, I don't have a grudge against, oh, yeah, I do. I don't have a very big grudge against him. And I'll probably get a marble in the mail this week. We're not playing for fun. We're not playing for fun. We're playing for keeps. We're playing for keeps. Life is real. Last week we were talking about forsaken. What it meant when Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And we saw all the words that are connected with that. Fortification. And Jesus was ready for God to step back. And that was important. But I want you to listen again to what God is saying right there in Hebrews chapter 13. Because you're not playing for keeps alone. Listen to what he says. Let your character be free from the love of money. Be content with what you have, for he himself hath said, I will never desert you. I will never forsake you. I'll never send you away. Literally what he's saying. I will never send you away, and I will never go away. I mean, that's permanent right there. God wants to be with us, and he wants us to be with him. But then listen to what he says in the very next verse. So that we may confidently say, God didn't just say that to be speaking. He said, so that we may confidently say, the Lord is my helper. The Lord is my helper. Saul forgot that. And some of you have. You need to remember it. The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid what man shall do to me. Wow. The Lord is my helper. The Lord is my helper. Is he yours? Or have you started asking someone else to help you with your life?